Микрофонов, ова е мојот, така? Да бидам близко до него? Нема проблем, можам да се адаптирам.
Дали може да започнеме, да?
Can we start? Good afternoon, everyone. First, I would like to thank you for the opportunity to moderate this panel, Euro integrations and reform processes, and to do what I usually do in my life, to question and to examine. I think that we have some provocative topics and issues in this panel. And I would like to briefly give an introduction, very briefly, because we are already late. So let us stick to the agenda. You will have a very strict moderator who will limit your time. I would only like to first we'll hear from the Deputy President of Slavica Grkovska, in charge of good governance policies. She will have a video address. Then we'll go to the Deputy President on European Affairs, Bojan Maricic, and in the case of all speakers, we'll have the same format. I will ask one question, and the participants, the panelists, will be able to respond within maximum 6 minutes. We'll have 2 turns of questions, so it would be ideally to stick to the format. Afterwards, we'll hear from the Minister of Justice, Nikola Tupanchevsky, in the same format, question, answer, question, conclusion. And then we'll hear from Alexander Baidovsky, Deputy Minister of Information Society and Administration. Of course, the same format. And in the very end, Her Excellency Amil Arsanjain, Ambassador of the Kingdom of Sweden to the Republic of North Macedonia. This is the structure of the panel referring to Euro integration and reform processes. Let us not forget that we saw that from the address of Prime Minister Kovachevsky. This panel is taking place in a very sensitive moment, in a rather security issues time, and I think that we have not been outside of a crisis for the past few years. We had the world economic crisis, then the COVID crisis, and now we have what happens in Ukraine. And in such situations, many governments suffer and show great vulnerability, and this is something that happens on a global level. And taking into consideration that these situations are very difficult to work and to accomplish visible political successes, because practically all social indicators are drawing backwards. However, the politics is not certain. We should speak both of positive and negative developments. We'll try to address all issues, especially taking into consideration that in the past few years we had some positive things, such as joining NATO, starting negotiations with the EU, something that should continue in future, the recognition of the language, of the Macedonian language, by signing the Frontex agreement and removing all doubts that there are certain issues in that area. And of course, for the part of the people who are believers, the recognition of the Macedonian Orthodox Church. It was a very solemn affair. Of course, developments are a bit more complicated in the past few months. Relations with Bulgaria are not on their highest level. However, each crisis is a new chance, and we'll speak of this with all the panelists, what are our chances, what are opportunities, how to exit the crisis in all the sectors covered by the panelists, and how to proceed forward. First, without any further ado, I would like to look at the video address of Deputy President Gorkovska, in charge of good governance policies. Are we ready? Please.
Почитувани гости, почитувани колеги.
Distinguished guests, distinguished colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I'm truly sorry for not being able today to be physically present so that we can discuss about what has been achieved this last year, but also for the reform processes that await us and are of top priority for the forthcoming period. In the past year, my cabinet invested its efforts in key processes based on three pillars: digital transformation of the society, anti-corruption policies, building professional, transparent, responsible, and accountable institutions. These processes may appear as completely separate. However, in the essence, they complement each other and are of key importance for building efficient and social just system that will be in the function of the citizens. I'm satisfied that in cooperation with the competent institutions in the recent period, we managed to enhance and accelerate these processes. The foundation of the digital transformation of the society is to establish electronic identity for each citizen. By upgrading the ID card, we will not only enable its use for electronic identification and electronic signature, but will also enable access to all digital services. Therefore, supported by our friends from the US and the experts from Estonia in cooperation with the Ministry of the Interior, we prepared the plan for establishment of national electronic identity. At the same time, we're working on a new law for archive activity that will enable digitalization of the archive operations and depositing of digital documents. Furthermore, we founded the National Council for Digital Transformation of the Society, having in mind that this is a social process that will last for a long time and goes beyond the mandates of one political options, both on central and local level. This council includes all key stakeholders from the executive power, from the legislative power, the opposition, the economy, science, and local self-government. In this way, we are making the process sustainable so that we can secure building an efficient, modern, prosperous society, something on which I have no doubts there is a social consensus. The past year showed us that we need strong social consensus on establishment of good governance principles, literally on every level possible in each institution, in each field. Transparency, accountability, efficiency and effectiveness, rule of law, integrity, inclusion and consensus building, availability for the citizens. These are the principles on the implementation of which my cabinet and I, in cooperation with the other institutions, have been working for in the past period, and which are the basic precondition for creating a corruption-resilient society. I'm sorry that in this brief address I cannot speak in detail about everything we have done in each segment. However, I must underline that we were especially committed on enhancement of the transparency of the institutions, for what we have concrete results, but also in the part of reinforcement of the integrity, not only among elected and appointed officials in the government, but also among the young, who must be the main instigator of changes. This process is not an easy one. It is not easy to change mindsets overnight. Yet, I believe that we are on the right track, together both with the civil sector and with the strong support of our international partners, and it will achieve progress. The citizens have become super sensitive to corruption, wastefulness, to any type of misuse of the official duty. The citizens require justice, they ask for a rule of law, they seek equality before the law, and we must provide this for them. We are already working with the competent institutions towards finding solutions and policies that will make corruption unprofitable. I have no illusions that will eradicate the corruption. However, I do believe that it can be reduced, it can be significantly controlled, and most important, I strongly believe that there should and must be some accountability for those who do not work and who do not comply with the laws. These are our greatest reform challenges. We must focus on them in the future period because it will undoubtedly change the awareness and the way in which we live and function today. This is a prerogative not only due to the Euro integration process, but for all of us, for our citizens, for our young people who will only be retained in our country in this way. Thank you, and I wish you all successful work.
Thank you, Mrs. Garkovska, for your video address. It's a pity we could not greet you in person today. This is the only panelist that I'm not able to ask a question today. I believe that any type of digitalization in the society is a question of social consensus and need. In certain parts we are better, in certain parts we are back, but we need to make an effort to make the digitalization process a priority, since the combat against corruption is based on it, and it's very tightly connected as a process. And I believe that the efforts in this direction are going to be intensified in the next period. We are going to go with the second panelist, that is the Deputy Prime Minister of the Government of the Republic of North Macedonia, Mr. Bojan Maricic. I would like to ask him, I know that we only have 6 minutes for discussion and we're going to try to stick to the timeline. We are in the EU negotiation process for 1 year so far. What are the challenges ahead of us? What do we need in this phase of the screening process? This is what I would like to know personally. And can we put this process under a question mark, having in mind the developments in the country at the moment? Thank you, Professor Markovic. Of course, 6 minutes are not sufficient. Distinguished Prime Minister, distinguished Deputy Prime Minister, and all the members of the government, 6 minutes are not enough to explain these processes, but I will try to be brief and explain what we have been doing in the past period. For me, 2022 was the most successful year for the EU integration process and for our country after the candidate status obtaining in 2015. This was a key turning point for our country, and we can notice that there is a difference in our status and the manner in which we communicate with the EU. What is ahead of us and what is the most important? I would put an accent on 3 topics. The first one, or issues, the first one is the screening, completion, and the development of documents that are necessary for opening of the first cluster. Thus, the screening and the reforms are going to be the first priority. The second, also very important, is the political harmonization, what the Prime Minister and the Deputy Prime Minister discussed previously. This is obtaining political consensus for EU integration, not only in words, but in actions as well, and continuation of this process. This is important, and I will explain why further in my addressing. And the third one is provision of financial support by the EU, which is not insignificant or small, and which is very important, especially in these moments of economic crisis. So it is very important to support all the presidencies, and I would like to thank and greet the Swedish presidency and the Swedish ambassador. Regarding the screening process, since September 15th up to date, we have completed 3 rounds of the explanatory screening, and we are in the second round of the so-called bilateral screening. So this means that 1 cluster was already completed, and we are in the cluster internal market. Last week we had 3 chapters of the internal cluster, and this was successfully done. This means that the key reports that the EC are going to address about us are these: the key values, core values, and the internal market. I am not aware of the pacing of the EU. Are they going to be able to finish this? But this is going to be the main priority for us in 2023. This would mean that we need, before getting the screening reports in the spring, to start working on the key documents that are precondition for opening the first cluster. These are 3 documents: guidelines for rule of law, guidelines for the public administration, and guidelines for the structuring. We showed that we have capacity to cover institutionally and politically topics that are first time included in the negotiation process, and this would be functioning of the democratic institutions, criteria, and reforms of the public administration, and this is the first time that we have treatment of these topics. The new thing is that the anti-corruption policy is horizontal level of policy, and it is discussed in all levels and in all clusters. This enables us to have a faster pace where we are more ready, and where we are not so ready, we will speed up the process as needed. This is a responsibility and a burden at the same time. If we finish the screening process successfully, if by spring we manage to develop these documents, we can expect that by the start of the summer, these documents will be presented to the Council of Ministers of EU for reviewing. This means that if we finish faster and sooner the political dimension of this process, the constitutional changes, that means that we will go faster forward. There are no more excuses such as this neighbor is blocking us, we are expecting from this country to do this or that, to give us a signal. Yeah, we have all the signals, everything is put on paper, and we need to do this. Just briefly about the money, since I see I have 1 more minute left. This year we have signed the IPA 20 agreement. We have programmed 22, the year of 22, and we are going to sign the agreement for 23, which covers or which enables us to use about 80 million euro. We have been approved for 4 structural projects. So we have the Corridor 8 included in this, and energy projects that are very important for us. Also the treatment plant in Skopje. We have a solid basis to continue where we stopped. If you allow me 1 more sentence, what is often said by the president, jokingly, that I have the role of a prime minister for integrations. I believe that it is true luck for this government that we have the prime minister as a prime minister, and that he always has understanding for the domestic occurrences regarding our position in Brussels and vice versa. So we need to understand that the prime minister is a prime minister for Euro integration, but each minister for Euro integration has its role, and that is to continue and to complete this process. So in this direction, the government has the EU integration process as a priority, and I would like to ask, to plead to the other political parties in the parliament to have logical and cool heads when deciding for what will be good for the citizens and for the future of this country. Thank you. Thank you for the responses. I believe we managed to stick to the timeline. I believe we will be more efficient in this way and more informational. Next question is for the Minister of Justice, Minister Tupanchevsky. What the public is interested in, and what we have discussed a couple of times previously, is regarding the distribution of justice, how the justice is distributed, how efficient, how effective, and how fair it is. The question is is there a manual distribution of cases in the courts? This is something that the public is interested in. Distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, I would stick to the suggestions of the moderator. He mentioned that we need to stick to the question-answer conclusion scheme. I'm going to try to give brief answer in these 6 minutes for the questions. There are several factors, exogenous and endogenous, that are directed towards corruption and criminal and dealing with them. What are the reasons and factors and how we can detect them and deal with them, tackle them? One of the reasons, one of the factors that can contribute for tackling or combating the organized crime and corruption is the digitalization of the judiciary system, the operability. That means connecting the public institutions and communication between the institutions. I would like to greet and support what is happening in the courts at the moment. This is the system that we have in the courts for some time now. This is the automatic distribution of the subjects or the cases, which is improving the condition in that direction, and the factors that are contributing towards progressing of corruption and organized crime are reduced. At the beginning of this year, the practice that was part of the work of the judiciary system became a part of the public prosecution office. We have tried to have coordinated actions with the representatives of the public prosecution offices to have automatic distribution of the cases in these offices. As of 1st of January this year, we have started with this process, and we are dealing with certain lacks in the system, but we have managed to have a positive movement. The initial results are showing that we are in the right direction, and our expectations are that with the elimination of the lacks that are of technical character, we are going to have a good system and functioning system. Thank you. I believe that I'm sticking to the timeline instead of 6 minutes. I believe we finished in 3 minutes in order to be in the time frame. I have a small amount of time to recapitulate what the Deputy Prime Minister said and what you have just said. I believe that the information about the screening was very important. The screening is very deeply ongoing at the moment. The public may be under impression that this process is not very well covered, or nothing is done there. But I'm very surprised that we are in a deep phase of these processes. The processes are speeded up, and I'm positively surprised, and I believe that we will be able to deal with the political issues that we're facing and continue where we have stopped. I believe that this is something that is going to inevitably happen, and this process is going to be speeded up, and we're not going to lose any more time regarding the constitutional changes that need to take place in certain format. What the Minister Tupanchevsky said about the digitalization of the judiciary system, I believe this is very important, since the judiciary system and the public prosecution should be given an opportunity to improve their rating and reputation in the public eyes, and this will be done with the systems that are going to be independent. If you allow me one more sentence regarding this. ACME system and case management system in the judiciary system are the two tools that are going to assist in the detection of the bad conditions and improvement of the efficiency of the judiciary on the public prosecution. In that direction, I would like to stress that starting from 2020, there is a law for management of movement of the cases in the courts. This law was initially implemented, but there are certain issues that need to be completed in this regard. Together with the ACME system and the case management system, practically with this legislation tool, we are going to contribute to know specifically in which phase of the process each case is currently. This is not something that we had in our country, but it is very important to follow from the initial phase to the completion, in which phase the case is, in which stage, and what are the reasons for slowing down of certain cases. In that direction, this law, together with the ACME case system and the case management system, are serious improvement in a direction of improvement of the efficiency of the judiciary system and the efficiency of it. I consider that, thank you, I consider that the efficient implementation of what you have mentioned through an integrated system is going to enable not only making the reputation of the judiciary better, but it will reduce any further manipulative practices in the judiciary, which is very good. We're talking about digitalization all the time. We have Alexander Bajdevski, the Deputy Minister of Information System and Society. So what Deputy Prime Minister Grkovska mentioned, and the Deputy Prime Minister Grubi and the Minister of Justice mentioned, I would like to ask, the digitalization is one of the priorities of both your ministry and the government. This is stressed out many times in the public, but I would like to ask, what are the specific steps that you as a Ministry of Information Society are taking? And I believe that your answer is going to continue what the Deputy Prime Minister Grkovska mentioned previously. You will be having an opportunity to give in more details this.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you for the opportunity that we as an Information Society Administration can present what we have done in the past period and what we are striving to do in the forthcoming period. I would like to greet the Prime Minister, the First Deputy Prime Minister, my colleagues, ministers, and representatives from the Assembly, diplomats, all citizens who are present here today. In the very beginning, I would like to say that in the Ministry of Information Society and Administration, we're working continuously on providing modern and efficient administration based on digitalization that will secure quality services for the citizens and for the business entities. What does this mean? It means that we are resolved to use the advantages of the ICT industry to create information society and to increase the productiveness in the public and private sector. I would like to underline that towards the end of the year, the Ministry of Information Society and Administration has prepared the National ICT Strategy for the period 2025-2027, and I sincerely hope that in the first months of this year it will be adopted and its implementation will commence for the purpose of achieving the average of the EU member states regarding the development of the digital society and economy. Also, in the past year, we have secured participation in the program of the organization Digital Europe, that is a very important program funded by the European Union. Because this program focuses on approximation of the digital technology to the citizens and the public administrations, it accelerates economic recovery and increases the digital transformation of the society. I would briefly like to speak of our systems in the Ministry of Information Society and Administration. Here I would like to mention the system for Central Registry of Population that in the past period was expanded with several more functions, and it enables better integration in the system of the State Election Commission. It is 27001 ISO certified system. It recognizes Sigma and RISPA that awarded a recognition to this system regarding the availability of the data. And what I would like to say is that the system has been operating successfully for 3 years and more than 14 million transactions have gone through it. The national portal electronic services is also very important because it is actively used by the citizens. Registered users at the portal, there are more than 88,000, and more than 27,000 or 27,000 are new users. 917 services are registered in the portal. We have increased the number of services on the national platform for services, and it is 227 services. I would like to present through numbers what we have done. Out of these 2027 services, 88 can be applied directly through the national portal for services Uslugi Gov.mk, while the other ones are services that can be used to apply to the external systems of the institutions. In 2022, we secured new 42 electronic services, out of which the Ministry of the Interior and services of the Ministry of Culture. Also, another important system in our ministry is the platform of interoperability that is used by the institutions, and not only the institutions but also the private companies. The possibility for exchange of information and data is given to 52 institutions, out of which 27 are new. We have 27 new users last year. Only in 2022, we have made more than 2 million transactions through this platform. But when speaking of the interoperability platform, we have the feeling that we can be much better here. The institutions should invest their efforts to use this platform more. I would also like to mention the DMS system used by more than 20 institutions. This system enables digital operation of the employees within the institutions. And of course, in IPA 2017 project, we have developed software for digitalization of the registries because they are an important issue if we want to complete the process of digitalization. And in parallel, we're working on 135 new electronic services through the same project. What I would like also to mention is that we are very committed to development of the security of the cyber area. This is particularly important during these times of challenges. We're securing training not only for the employees in the administration, but also through the portal for e-decisions of our ministry. We have secured trainings for all citizens, and here I would like to express my appreciation to all the donors who have assisted us in various ways, to the USA, the United States of America, the State of Israel. We have signed a memorandum for cooperation with them, and we are joining the initiative for establishing of a center for building capacities for cybersecurity on the Western Balkan. That is under the initiative of the Ministry of Europe of the Republic of France. So this is how we would complete this part as an important tool, and I truly hope that this year will be the year of new opportunities and that we will have other things to present in future. Let me just say that I would like to thank you for your address. Let me make a short summary. We'll have another turn of 6 minutes. If something was not cleared out in the first turn, then we'll speak of it in the second turn of questions. I think that my cooperation with the Ministry of Information Society and Administration is one of the longest, because I know many people there. I had great experience, although the process itself is very difficult. There have been many relations with the digitalization, but what I can say as a conclusion is that the ministry has a tough job because these services are quite fragmented. You should offer them to various portals, various topics. And although the digitalization is of key importance, I see that the digital gap between generations is no longer present. The generation that was less digitally literate no longer exists. Now, none of the students comes to take materials, but they say, Professor, please send us the materials on email. So we should digitalize everything possible. There are many experts in the field of anti-corruption and fight against corruption, and this is something that should be noted. They should use the same platforms so that there are no differences and lack of digital communication. Thank you again. We're at the end of the first set of questions. Now we will hear from the Ambassador of the Kingdom of Sweden to the Republic of North Macedonia, Emil Larsson-Jain. Her Excellency will have her question in English. If someone wants to use the headphones, I will give you about 10 seconds, 15 seconds for something like that, to do this.
Sweden took on the rotating presidency at the turn of the year. What are Sweden's priorities for its term at the helm of the Council, and how do you view enlargement of the EU to the Western Balkans, given that it has its ups and downs and its challenges in itself? Please, you have 6 minutes, and of course they can spill over in the second 6 minutes if you want to say something more.
Thank you very much. Dear Prime Minister, dear First Deputy Prime Minister, dear Deputy Prime Minister Martic, dear other representatives of government, ministers, of course also fellow panelists, excellencies, parliamentarians, representatives of civil society and media, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for this question, and also of course for inviting me to take part in today's important conversation. It is at a time of parallel crises that Sweden has assumed the presidency of the European Union. Russia's illegal, unacceptable and unprovoked invasion of Ukraine is causing enormous sufferings for Ukrainians, as well as posing a very real threat to European security. The full-scale invasion also has dire consequences for migration, food security and energy supplies. And meanwhile, the climate crisis is continuing unabatedly. The Swedish government has set 4 overarching priorities for the presidency of the Council of the next 6 months: security and unity, competitiveness, green and energy transition, and lastly, the rule of law and democratic values. The first priority is about providing security for EU citizens and strengthening EU's role in the world. The EU and its member states have rallied unprecedented support for Ukraine. We will continue the work of previous presidencies in maintaining and developing this united EU response. We will stand by Ukraine as long as it takes. Alignment with the EU on common foreign and security policy positions and sanctions against Russia remains crucial. North Macedonia's unequivocal stance and leadership on this issue is well noted and very much appreciated. Security developments in the Western Balkans is also highlighted in our presidency program as important to both the region and the EU. The second priority is to strengthen the EU's competitiveness for the jobs for the future and to meet the Union's long-term economic challenges. The economic outlook for the EU has deteriorated, not least due to the ongoing manipulation of energy supply. An economically strong and competitive EU is crucial to the EU's global standing. Innovative companies in a free and open market not only generate growth and welfare, but also lead the green and digital transitions. Competitiveness also means resilience. Unilateral dependence on energy or mineral supplies from a few countries constitutes a serious risk. We need to increase our own production in strategically important areas and diversify and deepen trade with other countries. We must also stay firm in our transition to the green economy to safeguard the basis of our economic model for long-term growth. The third priority is therefore to speed up the climate transition, fossil-free energy, green jobs and innovation. Europe must lead by example. Sweden's ambition is to conclude the negotiations aiming to reduce EU net emissions by 55% by 2030. European companies and industries are already leading this transition. The last, but perhaps the most important priority, is safeguarding the EU's fundamental values, including stopping organized crime and corruption. Upholding the principle of the rule of law and fundamental rights is an essential element of Sweden's, and indeed every presidency of the Council. Let me also mention a few words on enlargement. In December, the first ever EU Western Balkans Summit outside the EU took place in Tirana. The EU message was clearer than ever. The future of these countries and their citizens lies in the EU. We are firmly committed to welcoming the Western Balkans into the EU family. The geopolitical realities have brought a new sense of urgency, but the fundamentals still apply. The benchmarks must be met. The process will and must be rigorous. It will take determination, dedication, and national agreement on the overarching strategic direction of a country for EU membership to be realized. Thank you.
Ви благодарам.
Thank you. If I have to draw a few points from what the ambassador has said, I wait for her to put her headphones on. I think that Sweden and North Macedonia share something in common, which is the somehow ungrateful position, as with most of the EU member states, with the Russian invasion. Sweden, maybe due to its geo position and commitments to the EU, and we, because we are a constant aim of hybrid attacks, and what the ambassador has said is very important for us to create a more resilient and more resistant Europe that could probably oppose any threat itself, and in that sense the hope and the perspective of the Western Balkans has to be sustained, and the dedication must be seen on the other side as well, with all the challenges survived and experienced by the EU, but ourselves as well. And what the Deputy Prime Minister has said, now the methodology is reversible, and I think that it was a positive step forward, although a lot of people have realized it as a very strict and unfair decision. I think it's positive, but at least on this side, it constantly prevents the democratic backslide that can happen in these areas, which is another safeguard mechanism for the EU candidate states to progress the way they should be. We are halfway through the panel, and a lot of time has passed, so I'll ask the panelists to be as brief as possible. That will be ideal, since the major topics were discussed during the first part. I'll go back to the Deputy Prime Minister, Mr. Bojan Barišić. My question as the Vice President and the main negotiator of the EU, with the EU, we know that what you're doing is a very costly and difficult process for us as a small country. We touched upon this, how much foreign aid will help in this regard, since this topic, under my modest view, is unknown to the general public. There are constant speculations, and there are no precise and accurate pieces of information of how much we are seeking and how much of the money is used. Thank you, Professor. I deem that this topic is indeed crucial, and I'll try to approach it more strategically in order not to get stuck in figures. Otherwise, we can quote figures as much as we want. It's important that about 100 million euro we receive only from the EU funds, and definitely we have some key strategic partners, development partners or donors, that in addition to the EU, which is the most important and major investor in our development, are including the United States programs, the United Kingdom programs, Switzerland, Sweden, one of the rare EU member states that provides serious bilateral assistance to North Macedonia, Germany as well, but these are the most present ones, not to forget anybody. I'll stop listing them. Our idea is to continue the coordination of our donors, which is very important to be able in our joint efforts to connect their coordination with our national strategic plan and strategy that should be identify the priorities on a long-term basis, because any donor coming to us, to the government or to the country, has an insight into the priorities and where funds from domestic budgets have been provided, where funds from the EU have been provided, and where we would need donors' assistance. That's one part of the story. That's a very important component of development and negotiations, because negotiations and money utilization should go hand in hand, and IPA funds and generally foreign assistance funds are the positive of nice face of the EU integration that should help the country implement the difficult reforms and also change the system and systematize the system to improve both the infrastructure and environment. I think that the major infrastructural projects are to everybody inside. Corridor 10 has been completed. Corridor 8 is underway. All the assistance in terms of energy about the photovoltaic stations across the country are very important components of foreign aid. Infrastructure is in a focus, and the energy sector, and that's how it should be. And what's the other side of the same side of the medal is the capacity of our administration to manage such funds and to perform the difficult reforms and transformations. I'm sorry that the Minister of Finance has left, but we will have an opportunity to discuss this, and we have had such opportunity. The strategic positioning to good staffing and good workers in our administration is the benchmark that will define how long our negotiations and how well will be going on to retain those people, and the ones that are less diligent to be motivated and to ask them to find another job outside of the public sector, believe me, will mean that we've done our job nicely, because our institutions do have the capacity. However, it is based on a few diligent, good people that provide maximum efforts and effects for the rest of the administration. So I deem that if the government manages to make an inclusive strategy that will not partially resolve the administration issue, especially for the people invested in the negotiation process, which is a long-term process, this would mean the best investment, because that's how we're going to sustain the continuity, because this process will last at least 7-8 years, definitely, and everybody will be able to rely on those people, good workers, this administration that are managing the screening. We have 40 people in any delegation going to the Brussels, and all of these people representing us there have the memory what it was like 15 years ago, how improved it was in the meantime, and what should come next. And politicians will be held to their responsibility, but to upgrade and add additional successful people in the system, for me, might be the investment that will be most cost effective. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have cleared up a big dilemma with this. with regards to the finances, amount of finances that are received by the country on different bases and are the pre-accession assistance. Of course, the aim is to use them with the specific purpose. Of course, there are several factors that are not functioning in our benefit. Some people are leaving leaving the public administration, going to the private sector, but we need to create the capacity and we need to tackle these challenges in original and innovative ways. And we need to find ways to keep the diligent and the hardworking people in our public administration. Another question for Minister Tupanchevsky. We have discussed these issues a lot of time. Me as a political scientist and the minister as a legal expert, we had some expectations regarding the vetting of the judges. I would like to ask you how far along we have come in this process. Some people see this as a controversial process. Some people see it as a sort of a solution, if I can use this word, for a less dramatic defining of the conditions in the judiciary system. 4 minutes or 6 minutes? 4. Thank you for the question. It was posed in an intriguing way. Your syntagma was that we're dealing with a very controversial topic. I would like to comment to your comment that we're talking about an evergreen topic, a constant issue that we're discussing for the past decade, I would say. My suggestion is to be careful when we're talking about the vetting. Why careful? Because we have already had comparative experiences from Albania. I will mention only a few segments from their experience in this process. In 2014, they have started the vetting process that was supposed to be completed last year, 2021. We're in 2023. This was the second deadline, and the deadline was further set up for next year. It means that the anticipated results for what the vetting should result in are not what was expected. So the checkup of the judiciary system or the public prosecution offices is not resulting in what was anticipated. In Albania, this process showed that Albania is having no more public prosecutors and judges. It means that about 80% of the judges did not pass this filter. Out of 9, 6 people did not pass the process, including the president of the Constitutional Court. For 2 years now, Albania does not have any judges for solving the cases. Do we need in our country, just to remind of a certain topic, when we're discussing the vetting, we're discussing initially 4 standards or criteria that need to be cumulatively present regarding the check-up of the quality of the work of the people. We're talking about the integrity, qualifications, connection with the crime or organized crime, and the 4th criteria is the property, the ownership of the judges and the prosecutors. In our country, for some time, we're talking about the vetting process, but before we come to this process of vetting, we need to address few priority issues. Whether the vetting is going to be partial, is it going to refer only to the judiciary system and to the prosecution system, or is it going to refer to all the appointed high officials? The second thing is whether the vetting is going to be done with the existing capacities in the country, since at the moment our country has capacities that could address this topic. And the third segment, also very important, are we going to go with the existing legislation, or we need to adopt some new legislation? So in this direction, we need to come to a conclusion what we need to check up and what is the manner in which we will need to check up. Thank you, Minister. I consider that we're dealing with a very sensitive topic. This is a social need on one hand, and on the other hand, this cannot be turned into an individual revenge against certain persons or people, but I can say that the experience of the Republic of Albania is very indicative, whether you can have elementary functioning of the system, and I like that you have broadened up the topic. This is always a dilemma: who is going to supervise the supervisors or monitor the monitors, and what legislation is going to be used in this process. Wider social consensus will be needed. In that context, I will say that the experiences are showing us that whether we are going to use the existing capacities or we will upgrade the capacities that we have, but we need people that will work exclusively on this topic. We have mentioned the example of Albania. They have a national committee that is working on this, and they are very heterogeneous in their composition, in order to have good results of their work. In that direction, they have a special appellation collegium, which is a second instance body. And from legal aspect, I can say that if a judge resigns and it ends only with the resignation, I believe that we have not come to a completion of this process, because the resignation or the freeing of the duties of a certain official is only a part, because we say, and this was part in some titles in the media, that the judges are judging themselves. Talking with Mr. Bajdovski and regarding the reform of the public administration, this is something that we haven't stopped for the past 30 years, and we have big expectations. This was mentioned also by the Deputy Prime Minister. We're facing certain factors that are not going into that are not of benefit for the public reform. So what are we going to do in the next period for this situation to be improved in coordination with the anti-corruption policies? So what will you say in this?
Thank you. When speaking of administration, we often say that our objective is to depoliticize the administration, to be accountable and transparent. And we're saying this, as you said in your remarks, we have been saying this for years. However, I believe that in the past period we have been working a lot. We will continue to work in future so that we can achieve it. What is in our benefit, in the benefit of those who work in this, is the new accession negotiations methodology, because this area is defined and is part of the fundamentals cluster. We'll have increased pressure over our work so that we can be more efficient, more productive. And the reforms in the public administration to be led much faster. What we are doing at the moment in the ministry is very important. It's the new strategy 2023-2030 for reforms of the public administration that addresses all the problems that were stipulated before. But now we have concrete steps that need to be undertaken so that we can come to our objective. When creating the strategy, we consulted all stakeholders, unions, we had public debates all in order to somehow make the measures better and to accelerate this process. Something that is also important are the laws that regulate the work of the administration officials, and these are the law on employees in the public sector and law on administrative officials. We had a public debate, and I hope that in the forthcoming period the government will adopt this and will address all problems that were mentioned before. That is the motivation of the employees, attracting new quality staff. The reform of the administration is a long-term process, and the reform of the public administration is something that is being done continuously, and that is why I would like to underline at this moment. This process has not stopped. I think that we are resolved to make the administration more professional and to accomplish what we believe in. In order to accomplish these objectives, we have the draft version for the system of salaries in the public sector that in the past has stirred a lot of attention. However, believe me, this is a very difficult process that has not been initiated for years. We were courageous enough to open it, and I hope that in cooperation with the unions and all other stakeholders who will be part of the process, we will find a solution that will be high quality one, and will keep the priorities of the public administration. In the very end, I would like to speak about another important thing, and that is the reorganization of the public administration. In the past period, we have been working a lot, and we have 3 pilot projects in the Ministry of Economy, the Ministry of Agriculture, and in our ministry. We're already drafting the contours of the new positioning. Our purpose is to have clear lines of responsibility, increasing the level of transparency, decreasing of the competences. In the interest of the time, I would like to say that we are working on a lot of measures. We have a lot of activities, all in order for the citizens and the businesses to receive better service from the public employees. Thank you. Thank you for your response. I think that the digitalization may compensate for what we're lacking in human capital and human resources. However, the process of digitalization can never fully replace motivated workers, motivated people in public administration, something that I had the opportunity to see in the Ministry of Information, Society and Administration. I met some of these people who, within the process of open government partnership, have shown responsiveness. I want to see all segments of the government and administration having this kind of people. We only need more innovative approach. We will close the panel with the last question for this only lady on our panel, the Ambassador of Kingdom of Sweden. If some of you do not understand English, please use the headphones, taking into consideration that the question will be into English. Of course, it refers to our Macedonian perspective.
What would you say are the key challenges facing North Macedonia's EU accession process, and what is Sweden doing on this topic or concerning this topic? So let's go directly in medias res, as they say.
Thank you very much. I mean, the answer to that question of the key challenges are, of course, both simple and very difficult. It is the question of the change of the constitution and the wide range of reforms that must be undertaken, implemented, and enforced. The political leaders of North Macedonia will decide whether to make the decision to change the constitution to include a reference to those who self-declare as Bulgarians, in accordance with the commitment that was made this summer to open accession negotiations. My distinguished colleague, the EU ambassador Geer recently spoke on this subject, and he was clear that, and I quote, "In order to maintain the momentum that has been achieved to date in the accession process, the change to the constitution does need to be made." He also stated that he does not, and again I quote, "believe it realistic to place any hope in the renegotiation of agreements painstakingly reached to date." The second challenge then is reforms in all areas, and very importantly also in the rule of law, all at a high pace. This will be a transformative process. It will require hard work and determination, but the reforms will also benefit the citizens of North Macedonia, not from the day when the country enters the EU, but from the day the reforms are implemented. The scale of this change means that it must come with an all-of-society approach. As we all know, corruption is corrosive to society. It weakens democracy by undermining the trust in institutions. It also threatens the functioning of the economy, and it distorts competition. Citizens and businesses lose, and society as a whole. It stems from this that the fight against corruption and other dimensions of the rule of law are fundamentals of EU membership. It is no coincidence that they are also the areas that start and end candidate countries' EU accession process. This is no small task, and there have been some significant obstacles along the way that have raised concern among EU members. A genuine commitment by all stakeholders, along with national ownership, accountability and transparency is needed. The agenda is heavy, and all efforts need to be directed at reforms in order to progress at the pace that North Macedonia has indicated by setting 2030 as its target for EU accession. Distractions, even very frustrating ones, should not be allowed to derail the reform agenda. An important reason why there is momentum on North Macedonia's EU accession is the country's own efforts in the screening process. In the Council, good news are rare when crisis follows on crisis. The progress in the screening process for both this country and Albania are therefore received very positively. The process will be rigorous, benchmarks must be met, but there is momentum. This is an opportunity to propel the process forward. As any sailor would say, if you have wind in your sail, go sailing. Don't stay at port worrying about the potential lack of wind tomorrow. When I handed over my credentials to President Pendarovsky in September, I said that North Macedonia could count on Sweden's support on its continued path towards the EU. The road may be long and winding, but you are not alone. Sweden is the largest bilateral donor to the EU accession process among the EU member states. Today, I am very happy to announce that our development program, which stood at approximately 6 million euros last year, and is specifically aimed at assisting national authorities and civil society in the process of EU integration, is set to increase substantially. We will be able to increase support by nearly 20% already this year, absorption capacity permitting. To date, Swedish support given to a wide network of national institutions participating in the EU integration process, in particular the Secretariat for European Affairs, has contributed to bringing on board highly qualified experts and provide trainings and other forms of capacity building. Through our development cooperation, we also provide support, for example, to skilled investigative journalism. A free and independent media and a well-functioning civil society are key in the EU process. They play an important role in holding those responsible to account. And with that, I thank you for inviting me to address you today. Vi благодарам.
Ви благодарам за ваше.
Thank you for your remarks. Of course, we are thankful for the assistance we have been receiving from Sweden and the European Union as a whole. I think that the Constitution, although it now may seem as a problem that cannot be resolved, it will be easier to resolve compared to the corruption, if I may reflect on the first address of Madam Grkovska. It cannot be eradicated, but yes, we can try to reduce it, and I think that significant efforts will be invested. If I need to resume this panel in one sentence, the next efforts of the government in the forthcoming period, of course, in terms of crisis, with many bilateral challenges in terms of difficult national consensus, that it is disabling factor, of course. I think that it is positive that the roadmap is clear, the objective that we want to reach is clear, and let us hope that we'll achieve it faster and without any ado, although there are many difficult processes as for all the other countries. Once again, thank you for your participation, and I hope that the public and those who are present here have received satisfying answers. Let us greet our participants and let's go for a coffee break.